By the time I got to be the chief financial officer of a public limited company, I found that I wasn't enjoying my work as much as I used to. I found, where once upon a time I enjoyed putting in 60 hours a week, I was no longer enjoying that. I wasn't waking up with the buzz to, do what I was doing.
Today, we will look at how your definition of success changes over your life.
So initially in my 20s and 30s, I would have been chasing the corporate dream. I would have been looking to advance in my career and earn more money.
Why you need to embrace change in order to remain relevant.
Being able to embrace change, I think, is really vital for business, because if you don't embrace change, you'll be left behind.
The theme for this season is Embracing Life's Tapestry, and my guest is Paul O'Reilly. You've worked up to Chief Financial Officer level as an accountant. You've also had a franchise business, and now you're working as an independent financial consultant. What circumstances have shaped your life to become the person you are today?
I suppose with many people of my age, I'm approaching late 50s at the moment. So I suppose your life is in sections. And, excluding childhood, I suppose, if we're looking at a career perspective, excluding childhood, I studied and trained to be an accountant, and qualified from a small partnership firm back in 1993, I think it was. So then I joined a software company and worked in the software industry for many, many years. But I think, there's an early stage in your career where you want to join the career ladder, you want to be successful, and as defined by, career people are the same. The more you earn and the further you go up the ladder, the more successful you are. And I think at a young age, that is normal and acceptable. So I did that up until I was about the age of 40. But by the time I got to be the chief financial officer of a public limited company, I found that I wasn't enjoying my work as much as I used to. I found, where once upon a time I enjoyed putting in 60 hours a week, I was no longer enjoying that. I wasn't waking up with the buzz to, do what I was doing. And I found, I needed to start looking at my life and kind of start figuring out, oh, what's important, what's not so important. Is climbing the corporate ladder really all that important? So at the age of 40, I don't know, some might call it a midlife crisis or whatever, I'm not sure. But I stepped away from my job. I actually spoke to my boss about it. I knew him quite well and said, look, I can't be doing this for the next 10, 15 years of my life. So I stepped away, took about a year out, and reflected upon what I wanted to do. And while I'd always enjoyed being an accountant, I wanted to see if I could do something that could earn money, but also maybe give something back into the community. So I came across a franchise called Bluebird Care, and Bluebird Care provide domiciliary care. And that basically means that we provide care to people in their own home. So very simply, if you have an older person and they need a little bit of help getting out of the bed, we'd send in a carer to help that person get out of bed. But it doesn't have to be confined to old people. It could be somebody with a disability, both mental and physical, or whatever. So I did that for approximately 10 years, and I really enjoyed that and built a successful business. But then an event occurred whereby a member of my family, close member of my family, became quite ill. And again, I suppose it was a time of realization of, well, what's very, very important. And when somebody is very ill and potentially life-threatening, it puts you in a totally different perspective. And for me, then all of a sudden, that person's life was far more important than the business I was running. And I basically sold the business quickly, and focused on making sure that that person's needs were met. Luckily, that was all worked out really, really well. But then once we got back on the straight and narrow, for the want of a better phrase, I started looking around again. What will I do? What will, is there anything to be doing at this stage? And what happened was I was approached by a friend of mine who was having a little bit of difficulty in his business, and he said, would I mind coming in and helping out? And that's what I did. And that was in late 2016, early 2017. And I haven't stopped since. I haven't gone looking for work. I just took on two new clients in January of this year. And I'm really enjoying, but I have a really good work-life balance. I kind of work the hours I want to work. I can do my work at any time, so it doesn't really matter whether I do it at 9 o'clock at night or at 8 a.m. in the morning. So I suppose I'm not sure if I'm answering your question fully, but I think what drives you to do what you're doing is different depending on the circumstances that you have. So when you're young and in your 20s, early 30s, your motivators are different to what they might be in your 30s and 40s, and are certainly different to what they are in your 50s and hopefully 60s. So maybe that does answer your question.
Yeah. For the benefit of the audience, I know Paul somewhat as a person, and I know you've got quite a varied network of interests. You're involved in golf, you're involved in Rotary, Toastmasters. Do you find, Paul, the fact that you have a wide network of interests and people that you know throughout the Dublin area, for example, that stood you the test of time, that you can get referrals for your business reasonably easily without having to go out there on social media to market yourself?
Yeah, and yeah, without doubt, I wish I had started networking earlier in my life, but I did start, and it wasn't a kind of a totally conscious decision. It was when I set up my business in the home care. I decided that, look, I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to go outside my norms. So I joined a Rotary Club in Dublin, Fingal, which I'm in now about 15 years. I joined Toastmasters, which I know you're a member of. I joined that about 15 years ago. But I'm always looking for new things to do and new networks, and they don't necessarily have to be business networks. I took up yoga 7 months ago, and then when people start saying, oh, what do you do? And you can find referrals that way. So luckily, I have been very lucky, but I also joined in the last 2 years, I joined a group called My Drumcondra, and they are a business group, but they're not like a BNI business group where you have to bring referrals or you have to bring people along. It's far more relaxed. We meet once a month and we have a speaker that normally speaks about business and issues like that might be of a benefit to the membership. And quite often, it will motivate the members to go out that day and feel a little bit better about themselves or make a change in their life that might change their business.
What do you see as the common misconceptions that people have about business when you're going to look at their business and give them some consultancy and feedback?
I would think that what I see most often is the lack of change in business. They're always doing, we always did it this way, and they're kind of a little bit blinkered to not look outside the box, especially with new technology. So the old phrase springs to mind: if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. So it's important, I think, to look outside what you're currently doing and embrace new technologies. Kind of can be simple, like invoicing by phone. There's so many new things out there. There's also, from an accounting point of view, there are auto entry apps. So like an invoice comes in, it's automatically put into the system. You don't have to key it in anymore. So being able to embrace change, I think, is really vital for business, because if you don't embrace change, you'll be left behind, because your competitors will embrace the changes and move ahead.
Yeah, I do remember many years ago when I worked in London. I worked in this cable manufacturing company, just telling a story here, Paul. And the company was involved with, say, manufacturing those coaxial cables, which were used on computer networks at the time in the late 80s. And then all of a sudden, the shielded twisted pair type of cable came along and was used in networks. And then Pilkington Glass, they founded that whole area of fiber optics. They were the people who developed the whole fiber optic area. And then the organization found itself working in a declining market where there was competitors coming along with better and newer solutions. And they had to, undergo a complete restructuring of the business. And it was painful at the time for the people who worked there. A lot of people lost their jobs, and it was quite difficult. So it just goes to show the danger of, organizations believing too much in their own story, and they don't see the change, or they don't anticipate change in a market, or they don't see new competitors coming along with products that can usurp their offering. That's quite a danger in believing too much in your own message. Yeah.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the phrase, just comes to mind again, is there is only one constant in life, and that is change. Things are always changing, be it in your personal life, professional life, business life, whatever it is, change is always happening, and you have to embrace it.
I had a very interesting conversation with Donald Keating, who was former operations director of Dublin Bus, and he joined, as it was at the time then, CIE back in the mid to late 80s as a young graduate engineer, and worked his way up to become operations director of Dublin Bus. We had this very interesting conversation, and what he was talking about was CIE, once it was broken up into the different operating companies, Bus Air and Dublin Bus and Irish Rail, it went through a huge amount of change. And you had the choice of either getting on board with that change, or you could leave the organization. And he'd choose to get on board. And what happened then was Dublin Bus sent him on development course. He did an MBA. He was sent to the UK to learn about the whole area of transport networks. And those courses were invaluable in his development and promotion up to including operations director level. So I think what you're saying there is, don't fear change, embrace it, but you have to find that resolve within yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Paul, you're a married man. You have a teenage son, I believe.
Yeah.
Would you like your son to go down the road of accountancy, or would you prefer to see your son deciding his own career path?
Well, at the moment, he is a goalkeeper with one of the better teams in Dublin. So I think if you asked him, he would love to have aspirations to be a professional footballer. That said, he does keep up his grades at school, much to his mother and my delight, because he's not completely focused on professional football as a career. I wouldn't like to take away his dream, though. He does have ability, he does have talent, but it is a very, very tough game, as anybody would guess, to get into. Would I like him to become an accountant? I wouldn't put him off becoming an accountant, but I wouldn't push him towards it. You can see parents that kind of push their kids towards where they would have liked, perhaps they wanted to go in life. I'd like him to find his own feet and support him in his endeavors, whatever way it is. And I would like to think it kind of where my dad always said to me, it's easier if you're swimming downstream. So don't go against it. Like sometimes people say, oh, well, you're not good at that. You should focus on getting better at that. I would actually be in the camp that says, if you're good at something, really work on that and become an absolute expert in that. So along the philosophy, as I said, of it's easier when you're swimming downstream rather than fighting the tide.
I do agree with you. If your son or daughter likes to do X, let them do it. Let them find their own voice in life. Let them find their own way. But be there to advise them if they ask. But don't push people down routes that are not for them. I think it's very, very good advice.
And the other thing I might add to that along those lines is I think we'd all have the friend who says to you, oh, I'm sick of my job, and they've been in a job for 20, 30 years, whatever it might be, but they're afraid to move outside that circle, and they're afraid to take on new challenges because they think, oh God, this is what I do. And, they get into that rut and keep going around in the same one, but they keep moaning and groaning about it all the time. And there's friends of mine, I feel like really shaken and saying, you got to do something about this. You got to move outside your comfort zone, and you've got to start doing something that you really want to do. And once you start doing that, you will I think you will find doors open. So I'd always say to people, particularly younger people, if they're in a job that they don't like, leave it. It's not worth staying on, because ultimately your health will suffer, along with your sanity. So if you're in a job that you don't like, you need to find a route out. That's just a add on from what we were just discussing a second ago.
I agree with that, Paul, because, looking at my own career, I've probably achieved more since the start of my professional speaking and career coaching business than I did in 25 years as an accountant. But I'm doing work that's aligned to my purpose and values in life. And I think that's the point you're trying to make is
Yeah.
don't be doing work just to keep somebody else happy. If you're not happy doing that work, you have to find something else you do like. And you have to shake yourself up and get out of your comfort zone and ask for somebody to give you that bit of help to find your purpose and values in life.
Yeah. And you can go back and retrain. Just as we're talking, I'm sort of things are coming into my mind. My wife's brother, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this, he was in a job. He was basically customer service at a help desk, and there was for selling products. But he'd been there until he was about 35, maybe 40. And my wife said to him, you really need to start, you're going to be stuck in this job for the rest of your life. So he went back, he retrained, he went to university, he got a degree, then he got a master's, and then he got a doctorate. He's now lecturing in TU Dublin. And like the guy he is from 10 years ago is a completely different guy. So, it can be done. And it was hard for him. It wasn't easy. So, but sometimes you have to take that hard path to get to where you need to be going.
On a more positive note, Paul, what inspires you most to be successful in life?
I suppose, again, going back to what I said earlier, I think you need to define success. And I think your definition of success changes over your life. So initially in my 20s and 30s, I would have been chasing the corporate dream. I would have been looking to advance in my career and earn more money. And that would have been my inspiration for success at that time. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I still reap the rewards of those today. I worked very, very hard, but I was well paid for what I did. And that laid the foundation for me being able to buy a house, etc., get a mortgage. So in my 20s and 30s, that was my definition of success. Then when I was running my home care business, again, I was looking to give something back to other people, maybe a little bit, but with a focus on earning money as well. And I think finally, in the last number of years, I finally got to realize, for me, and maybe for everybody, I think, but it is the best definition of success for me is living the life you want to live. And what I mean by that is, like, there's a balance in life. So maybe in the early years when I was in my 20s and 30s, my balance wasn't right. But at the same time, it was the right time to be, if I was going to work really, really hard, that was a good time to do it. I'm now a lot more relaxed about the amount of work I do. I put in a solid 20 to 25 hours a week with the clients I work with. And during the summer, I like to play a lot of golf. I'm involved in, as I mentioned, Rotary, my Drumcondra, Toastmasters. So I can do things that are, more social and a pastime basis rather than real hard graft. I don't earn anywhere near as much money as I used to when I was in my mid-30s, but that's fine. I think it comes to a point where you prefer to have time off than to be earning huge amounts of money. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, yeah. Another question for you, Paul. You talked about the corporate life there in your 20s and 30s. Were you the type of personality that had to learn the hard way to assert yourself in the corporate world, or are you just one of those naturally assertive people who can cope with life's challenges?
No, that's a really good question. What I would say about myself and my own personality is that, I always get on well with people, and I was always able to, strike up a good relationship with most people I worked with. I suppose my danger was I was trying to please too many people, and we've all heard of being a people pleaser. And perhaps that was if I was to change something, I was probably trying to be all things to everybody. And I came across a few characters in my corporate life where there was no pleasing them. And I probably should have been a lot more assertive. But sometimes people would say there can be a fine line between being assertive and aggressive. So it's a difficult thing to completely define correctly. But I would like to think for the most part, I was a good negotiator. I was a good diplomat. So if I could find a solution that worked for me, worked for the person I was dealing with, so where you could try and work towards a win-win-win situation, whether that was with a customer or with a colleague. That was how I tended to approach my corporate life.
Yeah. So you love the word collaboration. How would you
Correct.
put a person who would come to you in, say, an aggressive mode, and they're going to try and negotiate with you? You're providing a service, let's say it was part of your franchise business, and they wanted cost savings, and they're going to be pushing you to the limit. How would you cope with that type of personality? Would you just say, enough is enough, I'll walk away and let them stew in their own mess, for example, and come back to them?
Yeah, I suppose. Well, the example I would give, I remember this was in a software situation whereby one of our large customers wasn't paying us. And he was a Scottish man, and there was, he was holding quite a large sum of money, and the consultant manager said he couldn't get any joy out of the guy at all. So I got in a conference call with him back in the days when we didn't have Zoom. It was only a phone call. And I listened to what he had to say. So I think it was really important to listen. He had such a length of problems with our company and what we're delivering from a software point of view. Now, maybe he was a little bit over the top in relation to it, and his expectations were far too much, but he did have a list of grievances. So I said to him at the end of the call, okay, let's list out these grievances, agree what they are, and let's see how we can tackle them one by one by one. But on the other side of that, let's put a monetary value of what you owe us now. And when we knock off number one, you pay us $5,000. When we knock off number two, you pay us $5,000. And it was really funny. By the end of the conversation, or by the end of the project, and it took about 6 months, he owed us an insignificant amount of money, and there was a couple of things that we couldn't solve. And we had a great relationship. He was laughing by the end of it, because he would have been known as being, I suppose, a hard nut, so to speak. But I think I managed to crack it and get into what made him tick, but give him a result. So again, back to a win-win situation.
Yeah, you used a very good word there. You listen to the person. I think that's very crucial in any negotiation, is to actively listen to people, allow them the opportunity to get their grievances out there on the table. And you did that by probing the person, and then eventually he told you what his issues were. Then you're able to put in place a program to overcome those issues, and then he would start paying you installment payments to start clearing down the amount of debtors on your balance sheet. So that was a very good example of a collaborative win-win.
Yeah, and the other thing I was just going to add in there as well, now that I think about it, sometimes what I said to him at the start was, hand up, we've made mistakes here. We apologize for the mistakes we have made. And I think that can be a great thing for people in business. Quite often, some people are, they hate to apologize, and they hate to say they were wrong, and they hate to say sorry. I have found particularly, there was good examples in my home care business where, we hadn't provided the care that the person wanted, and there would be reasons behind it. Maybe the carer wasn't in good form that evening or whatever. But sometimes when the person comes onto the phone and they're giving out, sometimes you can take oh, well, do you know what? It wasn't our fault. Starting out with, look, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. I'm really sorry about that. Let's see what we can do to fix it. That can be a great start to a conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul. And I think what you're saying there is apologize and say sorry when it's appropriate, but don't
Correct.
overdo it because people see you as weak in a business setting. So I have one final question for you, Paul. If you were given the opportunity to have one option or one wish granted to you without question, what would that be?
Oh, oh. I think I might be a little bit personal on this. I could ask for world peace and things like that, but I think I bring it a lot closer to home to my son. I think young people are facing very difficult times ahead of them, and I would wish that his life would be free from any mental health issues or any physical health issues. I think to have a life that, living the life that he wants to live would be without any mental health or physical health issues would be something I would love as a wish. And then if the person granting the wish would extend it to his mum and dad, that would be great too. And the further out he could extend it, that would be fantastic.